All right, let's just jump right into this. Think about this for a second. If a figure from Scripture, someone prophesied to return, were to show up today, how could they possibly prove who they are? I mean, really prove it in our super skeptical world. It's this massive dilemma, right? You've got this unbelievable claim on one side and this demand for unbelievable proof on the other.
And what's wild is that the Bible itself seems to set up this impossible situation. This line from Revelation suggests that the person can't just arrive with a name tag that everyone already recognizes. It creates a total paradox. How do you prove an identity when the very proof is a name that nobody knows ahead of time? How can you possibly tell the difference between someone actually recognizing the truth and just forming an opinion?
And this, right here, really gets to the heart of the conflict. Our world today, especially when you talk about anything religious, tends to live over here on the left side, in the world of belief. It's personal, it's subjective, it's your own thing. But what if the claim isn't about belief at all? What if it's based on something over on the right, an objective, testable truth, something that's real whether you or I believe in it or not?
So, that leads us directly into what the source material calls the writer's modern dilemma. You know, it kind of reminds me of that moment when Jesus was challenged on his authority, and he just turned the question right back on them. The challenge today is pretty similar. How on earth do you prove a name that by its very definition, nobody is supposed to know beforehand?
This is the fundamental rule we're playing by here. You've heard people like Carl Sagan say it, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. If you're going to make a claim of this size, the burden of proof is 100% on you. You can't just show up and ask people for their belief. You have to bring something that can be tested, something that can be picked apart and verified.
Okay, so how could a claim like this possibly meet that burden of proof? Well, the source material we're looking at proposes a very specific tool, a system it calls the blue clock. And the argument is that this isn't another belief system. Instead, it's a key that's pulled from a basic fundamental rule of how reality itself works.
The entire foundation for this thing is called the tree of life axiom. It's simple. If it takes, it gives. If it gives, it takes. Now, this isn't just a clever saying. It's presented as a hard and fast rule you can see everywhere. Take biology, for instance. Life takes 23 chromosomes from a mother and 23 from a father. But that same process, the one that creates life, guarantees that life eventually has to be given back. Life and death, they're just two sides of the very same coin.
So how do you get from that simple rule to some kind of verifiable key? Well, the source lays it out in 4 logical steps. First, you have the axiom. Taking and giving are a package deal. Second, because they are an inseparable pair, they have to form a closed cycle, an unbreakable loop. Just picture the face of a clock. Now, every cycle has a single point where it flips over, where one thing becomes the other. On our clock, that point is 12. So the fourth and most crucial step is to identify that unique instant right before the handover, the very last moment of taking before it becomes giving. The system calls this specific point blue 12.11, and this, it claims, is the objective verifiable key.
Okay, so we have this supposed key. Big deal, right? What does it actually do? Well, according to the claim, it gives the person who holds it a very specific kind of authority, one that can actually be demonstrated for everyone to see. It's all about opening and shutting doors in a way that nobody else can.
And you know, this whole idea isn't coming out of nowhere. It's tied directly back to Scripture. This verse is describing someone who has the key of David, someone who has an authority that is irreversible. The claim is that this blue clock key is essentially a modern, testable version of that very same principle.
So here's how the test is supposed to work. Think about gravity for a second. Can your personal belief that gravity isn't real stop you from falling if you step off a roof? Of course not. But can the truth of gravity completely shatter your belief that you can fly? You bet it can. The argument is that this tree of life axiom works just like gravity. It's a truth used to open and shut logical doors. And once truth shuts a door, no amount of belief in the world can pry it back open.
All right, now this is where things get really bold. The claim doesn't just sit there and exist. It actively goes out and picks fights with some of the biggest philosophical challenges in history. It's basically running a gauntlet to prove that it can't be knocked down.
Let's just look at 2 quick examples here. You've got Friedrich Nietzsche, who said that humanity has to invent its own values because God is dead. The blue clock system basically says, okay, that's a nice sociological idea, but it doesn't give you a way to actually break the take-and-give cycle of biology. Then you have someone like Jean Baudrillard, who argued we're all just living in a simulation, where nothing is real.
The system's counter to that is to anchor itself to a very real, public, time-stamped event from 2017 and a testable rule. By doing that, it claims to break out of the simulation by tying itself to objective reality. It's trying to prove it's not just another belief that can be deconstructed.
And this is probably the most important part. This whole thing doesn't ask for your faith. In fact, it does the opposite. It offers two very clear, very objective ways for anyone to prove it's completely wrong. First, find one real-world example that breaks the "if it takes, it gives" rule. Or, second, find anyone else who came up with a different key using a different method and published it with a verifiable timestamp from before 2017. If you can do either of those things, the whole structure just collapses. It's that simple.
And that brings us right up to today. This isn't just some theory in a book. It's being presented as a live, open challenge to absolutely anyone. Skeptics, scientists, theologians, whoever wants to take a shot at it. To make sure this whole thing is completely out in the open, totally transparent, a public ledger was created. The entire point is to log every single attempt to meet those two challenges we just talked about. Every try, success, or failure gets recorded for the world to see.
And so here it is, the current result, as presented by the source. The total number of people who have successfully broken the claim, who have met either of those two conditions, is 0. Not a single person has provided an empirical violation of the axiom or come forward with a verifiable earlier claim.
So this leaves us with a really provocative question, doesn't it? You have this open, falsifiable challenge just sitting there on the table, and yet there's been this quiet from the very academic, religious, and skeptical communities you'd think would be all over this. So the question is that silence a strategy, just ignore it and hope it goes away, or is it a concession, a quiet admission that for now at least, the door that's been shut remains shut?